Okay, let's kick this off then. Just two brief introductions before we actually get to the core of the matter. My name is Ndabeni, and of course, I'm not alone. I'm with my husband here, Mr. Lesego Mutsabi. Ntate Ndabeni is our guest, Ms. Susan, and Ms. Susan is our visitor because she has a few questions that she'd like to direct to you, Ntate Ndabeni. All the positions that we're in are perfectly fine. So I hope you have your coffee, your glass of wine, something there to keep you company, because this is going to take a little bit of time because the topic that we're talking about today is an extensive one. I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank you once again for taking the time to join us. And we also like to welcome all the viewers who are going to be seeing this after we have recorded it, of course. We are a production called Thitokgang Media Production. And I'm not going to step into that so much because Mr. Mutsabi here is going to be the one who is explaining who we are and also what Thitokgang means. Mr. Mutsabi, can you take the platform?
Good evening. As already introduced, my name is Lesego. Thitokgang is a media production, and we mainly want to focus on rural area issues and to try and talk to the main issues that are affecting them. But let me start by explaining why Thitokgang. Thitokgang comes from a Setswana word. It's actually that Thito is the main root, and Kgang being an issue or a topic. So when you take those two words, you may have Thitokgang. So you're trying to go to the core of the issues. Mm-hmm. So we said there are issues that we face as people in rural areas. Can we unearth these issues, go deeper and understand them? Mm-hmm. So that's hence Thitokgang and this talk show.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. I hope that does give the viewers at home and also all the people who are online the understanding of what we are about. The name of the show that we have started, and I'm proud to say that today is the very first online talk show. So welcome so much to our two guests. We're so excited. I mean, we've been thinking about this, deliberating about it, and finally we've come to a point where we're actually putting it into action. We have called this show That's Deep. We've called it That's Deep because we feel that it relates a lot to our core name, which is Thitokgang. We are going to be focusing a lot on deep issues. And I know that Mr. Mutsabi here has mentioned that it's for villages and rural people staying in the rural areas. But, you know, as Africans as a whole, there are so many other deep issues and conversations that we should be having that are not being had at the moment. And we saw that gap and we thought, let us come in as people of South Africa, as young Black Africans who want to make an impact and make a change in our country. So without wasting any more time, we have a jam-packed program with questions because we're here waiting to listen. Noguti, what can we learn? You'll forgive me, Ntate Ndabeni, I'm a Zulu girl. It's just that fate has brought me to the Tswana land. So my Setswana is not 100%. Although you guys can't say something that I wouldn't understand. So I know my Setswana, but not so well that I could interview in Setswana. So with your permission, of course, I'd like to ask all the questions that we have here for you in Setswana. And to our viewers, just to give you an idea of who we are speaking to. We're speaking to Mr. Charles Ndabeni, who is an author of a book called Did You Know? He is also the chairman of the Global Tourism Legacy Network. So we didn't just go and ask anybody. We were like very particular that we want somebody who's going to add value to our talk show. So without wasting any more time, can we please give Mr. Ndabeni a round of applause and welcome him to our show today?
Thank you, Mr. Ndabeni.
And with that, Ntate Ndabeni, I didn't do justice when I was introducing you. So could you please just tell us who Ntate Ndabeni is?
My name is Ndabeni. I'm a knowledge architect. I'm an innovative disruptor. I'm a social entrepreneur. And lastly, I'm an African metaphorist. I'm chairman of Global Tourism Legacy Networks, Pty Limited. We're a social enterprise. We're based in Kaswani in Rustenburg, and we are in the business of packaging African knowledge. And subsidiary to that, we commodify this knowledge to create iconic African brands. And lastly, we implement social and economic equity programs across the Northwest currently, but our focus in the next 10 years is South Africa, the African continent, and globally.
Amen. Oh, welcome. I think that deserves a round of applause. I would have not done justice to that.
That's a lot.
I mean, so many titles, but all relevant. There is that one, that African something. I didn't quite get that because I think it's a new term, metaphorist.
What does that mean?
I'm an African metaphorist. I can contextualize. You see, Lesego and Slow, the biggest agenda that we face today, and this is global, is to restore the original African knowledge.
Yes.
And package it in a manner that we can fast track the decolonization process. And because you know that this colonization program started in 1884 in Berlin, it's nearly 140 years later. And very little has happened because the knowledge architecture that sets the agenda globally, its orientation and everything is based on slavery, colonialism, and apartheid.
So true.
So what we do as a business is we're saying, but what is the original knowledge that predates slavery, colonialism, and apartheid? And that's something that we will be sharing with you. So when I say I'm an African metaphorist, I use metaphor, African metaphor, to contextualize, to provide clarity of what it is when we say Africa is the cradle of life. And that's something that I'm prepared to share with you this evening.
I think I am more than blown away because, you know, when you read of a person, it's different than when you're actually hearing all these different roles that you're playing, and we have come to the exact right person. So you are the perfect candidate for the topic that we have today. And by the way, for the viewers at home, we are celebrating African Month. This month of May is recognized as African Month, and most of you would know that yesterday, the 25th of May, was Africa Day. And Charles Ndabeni has a lot of information also based on that as well. We want to then go straight into our interview because there is so much learning that still needs to happen. And as you have heard, he is all knowledge about African issues. And as you know, we are also Thitokgang, meaning that we are going to get to the core of these African issues. Without wasting any more time, I will go straight to the first question. And I think you have partially answered it, Ntate Ndabeni. The first question of what it is that relates you to the African topic, but more so, what would you say Africa Month means to you as an individual?
Let me start with a metaphor. Can I do that?
Yes.
Yes, of course. The platform is yours.
An elephant and a mouse were crossing over an old bridge. And this bridge happens to be in Africa because it is only in Africa when the colonial masters left. They left with a master plan. So these Africans are unable to repair or maintain this bridge because there's no master plan. They can't follow the master plan in terms of maintenance. So in the process of crossing the bridge, because of the size of the elephant, the bridge was heavily shaken. Now, let me give you a biological profile of an elephant. An elephant has a memory capacity 6 times more than any other living species, can live up until 100 years. The gestation period is 22 months. An average elephant weighs about 7,500 kilograms. It eats 300 kilograms of food every day. It drinks about 200 liters of water every day. So as soon as they crossed on the safe side, and I quote, the mouse says, "We shook the bridge."
The mouse was able to say that. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Because
the mouse says, we shook the bridge.
Amen.
Now, Lesego, Slow, what is the moral of the story?
I don't know if the moral of the story, I think, is that even the one who has not had any much impact on the bridge takes credit for it.
Amen. Yeah. And for him to be the one who's actually
saying it, you know, that we shook the bridge.
Yeah. Are we grasping the concept correctly, Mr. Ndabeni? Because I have the same.
No, you're very far. You're very far.
Are we? Enlighten us, please.
The moral of the story is that size does not count.
Size does not count.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
what counts in life is, what counts in life is your presence.
That you are here.
And look how strategic and futuristic the mouse is. The mouse says, we shook the bridge, not you. We shook the bridge, because when the shaking happened on the bridge, the mouse was present.
Yeah.
But the mouse is the only one that is able to pronounce that we shook the bridge. Because when history is revisited, what is going to be critical is not who shook the bridge, is what happened on the bridge. And then the mouse is able to pronounce. Now, that is the situation in Africa today. Did you know that Africa is the largest continent in the world? With the largest population, by the way, 1.8 billion. But you know, we will be told that we are the third largest population. The knowledge architecture. Did you know that Africa is 30 million square kilometers in size? It's 3 times the size of China, 3 times the size of the United States, and 3 times the size of Europe, all combined. But did you also know that the Congo River, did you also know that the Congo River is the largest river in the world, but we're told that it is not? Do you know why? Because Africa has not pronounced, and Africa has no presence. And because Africa has not pronounced, Africa has no presence, Africa is unable to lead. Now, and this is what connects me to this great continent. In 2018, after nearly 10 years of hard work, the United Nations approved Makonjo Mountains in Mpumalanga as the cradle of life. That is a massive decision. That has huge implications, even just from a knowledge architecture perspective. Because what it says is that Africa is the genesis, Africa is the origin of everything, the cradle of life. That means when you talk science, when you talk sports, when you talk civilization, when you talk everything, Africa is the genesis. Makonjo Mountains represents the oldest rock formation in the world, dating 3.2 billion years ago. So it is the only area scientifically that shows evidence of early life. And yet, I know Lesego and Slow, you're not aware of that.
No,
and that's the knowledge that
we're not even going to pretend that we do. And I guess that is why we're here today, to get all this information from you, and also Gastwana Barra Anya.
Yes.
So that when we come up and come out, we know exactly what it is that we're talking about. Thank you so much for giving us such a vast understanding of what Africa means to you. And I think the notation that you've used of the rat, so we are actually the elephant. However, because we were unable to pronounce, we are not seen as the elephant. But I think it's important that we remember that we are the elephant nonetheless, and try and change the narrative in which Africa is seen. And it makes me even more excited that we are talking about such topics here today. Now, because we are limited in terms of time, and we have a set number of questions that we need to answer, and we also have a guest who has questions for you, Ntate Ndabeni, I would just like us to go further with the questions, so that at least we know we have covered everything that we had set out to cover, and allow Ms. Susan to also ask her questions as well. Is that okay on your end?
Right.
All right.
That's fine.
Stuff. All right, we're going to move on to the next question, and this is related to our name, which is Thitokgang. When we speak of Thitokgang, we speak of deep and core issues or principles. Would you say that as Africans, we are aware of the power that sits at the core of being an African? So that being an elephant of us, if there's such a thing, do you think we as Africans are aware of the power that lies within us?
So, allow me to be creative and innovative in the way in which I respond to these questions, because I'm involved in what I call a knowledge revolution. We need to change the current literature and the current vocabulary in the world, because its orientation and its intention is to sustain the status quo, which is to advance the cause of slavery, colonialism, and apartheid, even beyond when people say we have collapsed apartheid. Yes, you could have done that legislatively, but in real life, spatial apartheid planning still, exists. But I want to say to you, one of the key victims of this slavery, colonialism, and apartheid system or systems was the African family. The values that are entrenched within an African family has been devoured. I would use the word devoured. And at the core of that African family is the role of the African matriarch, the queen, the panther. And how even today, post 1994, the queen, the panther, remains the most isolated, the most excluded person within the African family and within the African community, within society. And you look at how critical that an African woman and the role and the strategic knowledge that she carries as a leader of the family, by the way, as the leader of the family, how that role has been diminished. And today, and I make a pronouncement on your program, until the African queen is free, the world will not be free. Until the African king is free, the world will not be free. The African woman is the only one whose womb is pure, is original, and sacrosanct. Can I repeat that again? The African woman, her womb is pure, is original, and sacrosanct. And may I also interact with you and say, Slow and Lesejo, and I'll start with you, Slondiwe. Kalanya hahweka.
Kujana re Ndabeni.
Inkaba.
Kalanya hahweka.
Iteng ko KZN, pap.
Your umbilical cord.
Yeah. Iko KZN.
That means why Kalokanya. Do you know how fetsa go tsalwa kalane ya gago e tlhomiwa mo tsetsweng teng? Do you know what that does? It grounds and it roots you to this great continent. That's why ka Setswana re ga o swe, re fitla stopo, because that then introduces your immediate connection to what we call incarnation. And it goes further to then define who you are in the context of what we call African hierarchy of divinity. Moto, Batu, Badimu, Mudimu. There's no gender, there's no race. Moto, Badimu, Mudimu. So I'm coming back and say it is our duty to restore that knowledge back, to strengthen the African family. Hey, I keep putting and when I told Zulu, because you know, I always use this metaphor that my father is Zulu. That's why the physical structure and the bravery. My mother is Xhosa. That's why the intelligence and the creativity. But listen to this. My grandmother, Madikilidi, made me who I am because of her diplomacy, her sophistication, and her humbleness. I hope you heard the last one. Yes. Motswana is diplomatic, is sophisticated, and most importantly, is a very humble person. Maybe that explains why Lesego got married to you.
I concur. Luckily, I concur. Hey?
Yeah. So listen to this. Some of those basic things, like why do you have in a family somebody called Rakadi? Slow.
Actually, we had that
conversation. We were talking about it, yes. Going back at Ndabeni, as while we continue on Rakadi, I was saying to Slow that the structure of African family, to understand how Rakadi is actually your mother on your father's side of the family. She provides that motherliness on your father's side. There's a person who actually should say, you know, and offer that protection. And Malome becomes the father on your mother's side, who will also say the same thing.
You know why about Rakadi? Because she carries the knowledge of how to deliver an African child. What is Khadi Gaspana? Khadi ki womb.
Okay.
So Rakadi uiti ha mosadi ale mo milling gore o tshwantse a je eng, o tshwantse a dule jang, o tshwantse a nwe eng, o tshwantse a apare eng, because she has this strategic knowledge of delivering a healthy African child.
Okay.
That's why but as you correctly said, Bamufa a title ya sinna because he is the sister to your mother.
Yes, to your father.
And what he said is that strategic knowledge and that role that Rakadi plays in the family, because she is displaced, because she's subject to gender-based violence, because she's economically on the lowest end of life, she cannot fulfill that role.
And
that's why Banabaruna today, Batswala put Betlele. And what happens to the womb? It gets incinerated, and that is why a lot of us Hari Kalokhai. One of the things that I appreciated of what happened in a place called Buputatswana at one stage is this project where your identity document was called Ikitsi. Because the minute you know who you are, you are able to then engage with the world. But the minute you don't know who you are, you don't know where you come from, and what is your role and purpose on this planet, you are unable to fulfill anything. You are unable to pronounce, you are unable to have a presence, and you are unable to lead. because the basics have been removed from you.
Not to cut you short, Ntate Ndabeni, I feel ukuthi this conversation is to be had over a full day or full weekend workshop where we'll be sitting there and just grasping this information, because a lot of it is things that you would have thought about on your own, but not sure where to places. Like you're not saying it's something that we know it needs to be done, but we don't understand how it relates to us now. And so it means that I'm assuming, to answer the question, you feel that we do not, as Africans, we are far from understanding the power that lies in us, and hence people like yourself are here to then assist us to take that step forward and give us that knowledge that will help us to take the better decisions and do things with understanding going forward. So the questions prior, you know, in his explanation, somehow the answers are coming up. But just for the sake of the viewers at home, I will continue to ask the question, which is number 3, that will say, what would you say has allowed us to shift from some of the core African principles that were implemented by our ancestors? And I know you've touched on this already, but just to put more clarity and more of a vuma onto it, what are the reasons? Maybe just give me 3 reasons that you personally feel have allowed us to shift so far from the core principles that we should have learned from our ancestors.
Well, you know, I have, because I went through your questions, and I didn't want to come onto your program and answer the questions for the sake of answering the question. You remember, I'm a knowledge architect. My responsibility is to restore the original knowledge. So I would say to you, without, you know, belaboring the point, we require ourselves as Africans to have access to this knowledge. And I'm just going to mention quickly, this knowledge is available. One of the things that we do in our business is, and we've done that in the past 2 years, we've identified about 10 knowledge corridors in South Africa. But we are also aware that there could be many in the continent, because you're talking 54 countries. And I'll give you a simple example. Did you know of a place in Mpumalanga again? And I go back to Mpumalanga because I had the privilege of being the CEO of Mpumalanga Parks and Tourism Board for 3 years, from 2008 to 2011. But did you know that there's a place in Mpumalanga called Inzalo Yelanga?
Did you know?
I didn't know.
Now, here is the knowledge. Here is the knowledge again, and I'm trying to answer your question, and I'm sorry I'm taking too long, but I'm going to be quick. Inzalo Yelanga is the only place in the world where you can scientifically monitor the movement of the sun. On the 21st of September annually, without any fail, the sun moves from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, and it arrives at Inzalo Yelanga on the 23rd of September. And on that day, 2 things are critical. One, it is our new year on that day, and the land is then cleansed, and the land is healed, because that is the beginning of how we prepare ourselves as Africans
in September.
To prepare the field. In the 23rd of September is our new year, not the 1st of January. So what is it that I'm saying is that knowledge is deposited at Inzalo Yelanga. And therefore it says to us, we cannot be aligned to the calendar of the North, because the same sun lives here on the 29th of December and arrives in the Northern Hemisphere on the 1st of January. And that explains. So I go back and I say, let us restore the old African knowledge and ensure that this knowledge enables us to know who we are, know what we're expected to do, pronounce, have a presence, and lead.
Amen.
I hope I answered the question. I'm not going to answer your questions the way you want to.
No, you
answers.
perfectly answered.
I'm going to so if we know that the 23rd of September is our new year, it's a whole different orientation as to how we prepare ourselves going forward.
Yes, and you know, Ndabeni, some of these things, you hear them when you are growing up, and you don't know what they mean. You know, growing up in a village in Disane, we knew that the 21st of September is actually when you are smack into spring, and around that time you'll find that's when you'll get the first rain, the Kokola Moko and all that. But I mean, as a child, I didn't understand what it meant. So now I'm understanding now, as you're saying, it's the new year.
It's our new year, and it's the new season when life comes back, and that is where we then have a responsibility. You know, one of the things that just to conclude on this,
yeah,
when you check our names, I'm just using that as another dimension of the knowledge. When Lesejo, don't look at the simplified version of the name Lesejo, which means luck.
Mm-hmm.
The meaning of your name is what generates luck.
Mm-hmm.
Wisdom generates luck. Courage generates luck.
Mm-hmm. Knowledge
generates luck.
Yes.
So you are an embodiment, you are a reservoir in the family of providing wisdom, of providing courage, of providing hope. Because in the absence of hope, there can't be luck. But also your responsibility is to drive progress in the family. Because where there's progress, there's luck. So
all right. I'll take time to digest that.
Yeah, I've digested that for you. And can I just say something before he continues with the question? I'm getting slightly emotional, and this is just me. By the way, generally, I am an emotional human being, because every single thing or description that you have mentioned about the deeper part of his name stands true. As we sit here today, it stands, all of it stands true. Yet we were not aware.
We were not aware.
There is so much depth in the name as well. So thank you for that.
All right.
Our names are circumstantial.
Yes. Okay. What would you say are some of the core African principles that we can draw from in trying to remember who we are?
I go back again to the knowledge architecture. I go back to the knowledge corridors, and I'm just going to continue to share, because there's an umbilical link between ourselves and the knowledge and our cultural and environmental assets. Let me give you an example. Did you know that the Pilanesberg National Park, right, is not just a game reserve, but it is the genesis of the largest volcanic eruption, 1.2 billion years ago, of magma that occurred on this planet. And the source of that volcanic eruption is Mango Deb. And because the park is the only special park in the country, probably in the continent, that has these volcanic rings, it is expected that these rings would attract a lot of rain. And that is why that means into the Khetlen River. That's why there's a place called Mohwasa.
Yes.
Now,
Africa shine.
now,
Come on now.
now,
We're going to be lions and lionesses. We're just gonna.
Now, if you don't know, and if the people don't know how to relate to Pilanesberg, and just go there and be excited to be told that this is an elephant, this is a lion, they don't realize how deep, the scientific knowledge that relates and that resides, because it is that scientific knowledge about the plants, the herbs, the medicinal, properties that we can extract out of the Pilanesberg that can reposition us, recharacterize us differently than we currently are. And it's just one other example. There's many other examples. And I hope in this way I'm answering your question.
You are, and I think in not so many, in a simple form, is that we need to research, we need to invest in this knowledge and find out more about our places, about our culture, about
Who we are.
who we are.
Mm.
So it's a personal journey that we need to get into.
No.
Yeah.
Another degree.
Another degree. But I know you will answer it broadly, but what I want is, what are the principles if raising children now, what are the principles that I can say I want to impart X, Y, Z on these kids, so that I know I cannot give them everything, but can I give them a base to stand on? What is that base? What are those bases, or what is that base?
I go back to the role of the matriarch. I go back to the role of the queen, the panther, and I'll explain the concept of the panther, because there's a distorted view there that there's a black panther. No, there is no black panther. There's an African panther, and I'll tell you, one day what is the story about the African panther. But I'm saying two key issues. Make sure that there's a very strong family and there are good, strong family values. But allow especially your daughters to have a very close relationship with their grandmother, because she is the custodian of the knowledge. She's a reservoir of knowledge. And what is interesting is that our knowledge is oral.
Yes.
Our knowledge is not written. That is why our kids struggle in the so-called education system that they are subjected to, because they are then demanded to write things. They are not allowed to listen, because our biggest gift is our ability to listen and our ability to then act. And listening is a critical skill. So create an environment in which, and I conclude, allow Slondiwe to lead in the family. Allow Slondiwe to be, I don't know whether you've seen in the wild, the elephant matriarch is the one that has the knowledge. She knows all the water holes. Yes. She knows all the water holes in the Kruger National Park, which is 2 million hectares in size. She knows what food to eat. She knows the seasonality of what to do at any given time, given the original calendar. So 2 things you should do, and I'm being broad, but every day make it your responsibility to make Slondiwe happy and give her the space to lead, because she is God. She is a co-creator with God. She is the one who can break or who can make the family. And if you allow her to lead, you will have a family, you will have children who will be happy, you will have children who will be productive in life.
Thank you, Ntate Ndabeni. You've just echoed what my late mother said to me just at the start of our marriage. And she said to me, "Ngwanaka, lelapa ke la mosadi." You know, and
Thank you.
there's no need to compete. She just told me straight that
Yes.
lelapa ke la mosadi.
Hallelujah.
Mosadi ke yena a kgang lelapa.
Yes.
Yes.
And have you realized the first thing that I came across was the image of both of you, right?
Yes.
And you know what was my first impression? That man is so good. But immediately I looked at her. I said, that woman is so happy.
Oh, thank
Because
you.
if she's
Thank
unhappy,
you.
because if she's unhappy, you are not, because you remember, an African family is not about you.
Yes.
It's about conserving our DNA and our genes.
Yes.
And it's about giving something back to this planet, giving back to this great continent, Africa.
You said it.
No, but I feel
Yes.
like he's what's the word? Upendula matafula. There's just such a great gap in the reality of where we are and the history and the rich and nutritious history that you are mentioning. That I feel good. Hey, the gap is big. Hey,
Yeah.
The gap is really big, and for us to get to a point where we are even actioning some of the issues, you know, it's gonna take some time. But I'm happy that we are having the conversation because it all starts with knowledge.
Ntate Ndabeni, not to leave Susan out of this conversation, I must say she would most likely concur to the African mother being the center of the family. She was privileged to see my great grandmother Mabu, how she was so central to the family. I mean, we were all flocking to her.
Yes.
But I got to see her late, and she was in her 80s, I think, when I was born. But she commanded the respect.
And believe me, they say she was blind.
She was blind,
yeah.
You know.
However, she was still able to do that. And maybe Susan would like to share something about that.
Would you like to share something about that, Susan?
Well, I'm trying to even remember, but yeah, I do remember her now and again. And like you said, she was blind, but yeah, I mean, the way just everyone took care of her and everything when we'd see her, you know, from time to time. And yeah, that was home.
Yeah.
You know, everyone would go there and celebrate the whole extended family. So it was a good time that way.
Yes.
So I have a lot of other questions, but I know you still have yours. So
I think let's give you a moment here so that we can come to your questions. We've got 2 more to go, but let's give you a chance. Ntate Ndabeni, our guest also, Ms. Susan Mokhwera, she has questions. The stage is yours.
Okay. And Tati, I come from the US and I married into Setswana culture. And I love what you're saying, and I love that, okay, yes, Setswana culture is oral and so much, and if we don't keep talking, it doesn't get passed down. One of the challenges I have, or one of the questions, I have a lot of questions about the culture, and sometimes I don't know if people really know the deep root of everything, or the bigger meanings, because like you go to weddings, for instance, and there'll be certain things you have to do certain ways. And then when somebody like myself goes, okay, it's fine, but why do we do it that way? And I'll give you an example because this came up not too long ago. In Serlong culture, you're supposed to bring the the bohadi very early in the morning, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So I asked why. So I was told, no, you have to be the first ones knocking at the door for Enwetsi. But then someone else told me, no, the reason they do that, especially if you bring the cattle to the kraal, they mix in with the other ones. So in the morning when you let them out, they all go out as one. But it's, you know, these little things here and there that is like, okay, did they serve a purpose years ago, or do they still serve a purpose now? And you're telling us so much knowledge and so many things. My other big question is like, have you written all of this down? Where is it? How do we tap into it? Because if there aren't people telling about it, how are we going to know? So those are just a couple of brief ones at the moment.
Dr. Ndabeni, you can answer.
Yes. I think the first question, Susan, before I answer your question,
Yeah.
and some of the comments you've made is Lina la Setswana ke mang?
Lerato.
Wow, yeah, why we put Suzaniano?
I guess Susan is my given name, but Lerato is the Setswana name I was given.
You know, before I respond to your question, one of the things that I would like to confess is I graduated from the University of Life. You cannot institutionalize that university. And the chancellor of that university, and I had the privilege to know him very closely, and may his soul rest in peace, is the late Credo Mutwa Vusamazul. You know, Lerato, he was initiated at the age of 16 at Inzalo Yelang. May his soul rest in peace. The second person, and I would, you know, God allowing, and this great, you know, Lesejo and Slow, everything being possible, I would like you to visit the person that made me who I am. Her name is Meiki Grace Masuku. She's 91 years old. She's an environmentalist. She is the first woman to receive during the World Summit on Sustainable Development in South Africa a major award as one of the best traditional conservationists in the world. Everything that I know and everything I am today is because of Kuku Meiki Masuku. And you know, as an outcome of this process, I would appreciate one day Lerato visiting Kuku Meiki Masuku in Likutung, in Muruleng village. That would be because there is something so powerful about Lerato. I've never met you, I don't know you, but your energy is so powerful.
Thank you.
And I think there's something, you know, why this so-called visual session is happening. I'm not psychic, by the way. I said I am an African Metaphorist. So I would like to say, Slow Lesejo, let's create, you know, an opportunity for us to physically meet. And I invite you to visit the Pilanesberg, because I know that you're packaging this to shade with the rest of your audience, because we have a responsibility to distribute this knowledge. But I would really want to offer and say I'm prepared to host in the Pilanesberg, you know, when the time is available and everything being possible. She's 91, she still walks. Her mind is still strong, and yeah, that's all I can say. I don't want to go much deeper than that. I'm making an offer.
Offer accepted.
Okay, thank you so much, Ntate Ndabeni. The invitation is definitely accepted. If you can just, in a few minutes, just share your response with regards to Ms. Susanna's question. I'm seeing the time also just leaving us again here. And unfortunately, I don't think we can go on the third time around. So we can try so that we leave the big shots for Pilanesberg.
Yeah.
We will
So
definitely.
I think let's answer the questions that have Ms. Susan.
Ke arabile question ya Ms. Susan.
Yeah, young Ngwetsi, Ngwetsi, it's an application.
Ms. Susan na botsa gore ka serolong or ka Setswana go te bogadi bo tla phakela. Gore eng bo tla phakela?
The reason why ke araba ke re a reng ko motsweding ko Mamasuku, I would like us to get much deeper into that. I don't want to give an artificial answer.
Okay, all right. Ms. Susan, o ka botsa potso e nngwe gape?
Well, one of the things that happens this side, and I don't know if it happens there, but when you're asking those deeper questions, people say "ke malau, ke wow," and they don't answer it. So you kind of
Barking.
Ke molao.
wow, molau or in wow, either yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's a
It's the
rule.
law.
Yeah.
It's the rule. And then when you're watching things, like you can go to weddings, for instance, and you can have 4 different cultures. You'll have Senwakitsi, you'll have Bakatas, Sekata, Mochuria, Serong, or whatever. So sometimes you're like, well, whose custom are we using here? You know, what do we do here? What is expected of us? And then you find out people don't really discuss it a lot. So you're making it up as you go, and there's a lot of questions and confusion and everything. It's just like, okay, where are the preparation classes or the things that kind of guide us through there? I mean, if Leseo comes as an uncle now, as young as he is, and his uncles haven't taught him what he's supposed to do, how about the he'll go there, like my husband had this happen. He'll go there, he won't have a jacket on, he'll be charged. He'll come mid-morning, he'll be charged because they don't know these things.
Yes.
So unless we go to Nkukumasuku or others where people can sit and explain it before it happens, we're not passing it down so the next generation knows. So we also don't appreciate the origin, like you were saying, the deeper values and the deeper reasons for doing all of this. So as I think Slow talked about earlier, there's gaps. How do we bridge those gaps as well and understand? Because I think this generation wants to take shortcuts because, you know, there's just so much to have to be done and you don't understand and you get frustrated at the end of the day.
Lerato, yes, Lerato, 2 things. And I think Slow and Lesego can immediately make that available to do. Try and watch Grace Masuku's film. It's called From Gogo with Love.
Okay.
That's the first one. Secondly, I had the privilege when I was CEO of Parks and Tourism in the Northwest. We did a book on Grace Masuku. It's called The Legacy of Grace Making Masuku. It carries all the knowledge of how to raise an African girl child. And I go back and I say there's a strategic relationship between Kuku and the grandchild. That is the institution. And because of our economic situation, where our grandmothers today are now dislodged in various institutions, we call them old age homes. There is this big gap between Gogo and the granddaughter. The granddaughter is unable, because you remember her capacity is to listen. Her capacity is to sit around the fire with Gogo, and Gogo transfers that knowledge to her. That is not happening. You know, on the side of Lesego, we no longer go to that institution that prepares you to be a responsible man. For example, and I'll give you, because Bukhuera was not about cutting the whatever, I don't want to get into that, was about cutting the mind, you know, so that the mind must understand, Hore, Mosadi, you don't raise your hand, Mosadi. How big the Mosadi? And you don't you know, create a situation in which Mosadi cannot lead in a family. You don't do that. One of the things, and I'll just close quickly, what is his role, and how to treat a woman. And you know why about malome? Because ulumile litswele le mmago, right? And how can I go malome Lesego monna tlaga dikgomo. What malome is going to do is going to rear those cattle until dinner enough, but also allow you to be knowledged and to be empowered to know who you are and the responsibility that stands before you, before Nyala. Look at today. Rabalaila 30 minutes in a session yabuha. Yano runara rekastwana olaiwa from the day you are born until the day you leave. This education is every day. You know, it's not something that happens because slow. And that session takes 30 minutes. It's a session that starts when you are young, you know, so that you are knowledged and you are given the skills and the competencies, by the way, the skills and the competencies to compete, you know, in this life, in this world.
Ntate Ndabeni ra and you are really going into deeper issues. There was a question that we touched on, Susan, before you joined us. I'm going to digress a little bit. And this question was, yes, now I've married slow, and the time comes that I go and rest with my ancestors. Then the Motsabi family decides that all the assets that we built together, they are taking them away from her and the house we've built, and taking our children out and sending her back home because their son is dead. Where does that come from?
Well, it comes from what I say, imposed, you know, orientation, imposed values of a Western world. You know, today, and there's a video clip I did, and I'm sure you may want to look at it. It's called The 10 Fundamentals of a Successful Marriage. And what I emphasize there is that in our culture, you don't marry slow, or slow does not marry you because of what you are, but of who you are.
Yes.
This is very important, and that is why you become part of the family.
Yes.
And what is central is that you allow slow to ensure that everything that is about Motsabi is sustained.
Yes.
And that is why it's not the monetary value, and it's not the material thing that defines the marriage. Is how you allowed slow to be a Motsabi. and she eternally remains a Motsabi,
Yes.
whether you are around or not. That is why and I conclude, there's a village ko Botswana. Ga Motshabi a swa, ba mmoloka mo kalane ya gage e boloketsweng teng.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
That basically says you are going back to your roots, you are reconnecting, but you are still part of that piece of land where you are connected with. And one thing I observed, and I stayed there for about 2 months, one thing I observed is that the majority of Ahuna divorce ko Tlokwe. Can I repeat that again?
I didn't know that.
Yes, Ahuna divorce. And it's because people follow the basic fundamental rules of who we are and who makes us different from the rest of the world, where materialism does not define us, but our boto jwa rona ke bona bo diram batho, and we remain human until re fitlhiwa, and that's how we got reincarnated back, and that whole definition of our connection to divinity.
I think what Ms. Susan, what we are gathering is that actually it's not African, it's purely greed. The stripping away of assets from a family or from a wife is greed, pure and simple. And
But
that's very
interests me
simplistic.
so much.
That's very simplistic.
Ma?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I understand that, because, you know, when you do Bohari and all of that, you're to become, you know, she's the daughter of Mutsabi now.
Yes.
Yeah.
The son of that family. And then when things go wrong, it's just crazy. And it's like, but they made so much emphasis on the Kiwanawa Romajan.
Yes.
Okay, guys, I'm so
that is
sorry, Mr. Ndabeni, sorry, I'm so sorry to be the bearer of good news. I am the timekeeper, program director, and everything in between. 1 minute is left. Just closing remarks from you, Mr. Ndabeni, and I'd like you to just touch slightly on any positivity that we can have with regards to being an African. And this you're gonna have to do in 20 seconds, because I kid you not, we have about 30 seconds left on this session. So please just do that for us before the session ends.